Imagine living in a world without fertilizers, tractors, or GPS-guided harvesters, yet somehow feeding entire villages generation after generation. That was the miracle of medieval farming. These people turned bare earth into abundance, using nothing but observation, muscle, and rhythm. Their secret wasn't luck. It was a design and ecosystem that balanced itself like clockwork. They started with something revolutionary for its time: the three-field rotation. Instead of exhausting one plot until it died, they split their land into thirds, one for wheat or rye, another for beans or peas, and the last left fallow to rest and regrow. Each year, the crops rotated like players, switching positions. The grain took nutrients, the legumes gave them back, and the fallow field healed in silence. It wasn't just smart. It was survival, disguised as strategy. You could smell the wisdom in the soil itself. Rich, balanced, alive. Of course. To make that soil worth turning, they needed power. Enter the heavy plow, a piece of medieval engineering genius that sliced through Europe's stubborn clay. Forget those light wooden scratch plows that barely tickled the dirt this one bit deep, turning dark earth like waves breaking. 8 oxen strained against its iron share, their breath fogging in the morning chill. One pass carved furrows so straight you could follow them to next week. It changed everything, opened new land, thickened harvests, and made entire villages possible where none could have survived before. But soil isn't enough without water. Medieval farmers understood that water was life, but too much or too little could destroy everything. So they built ditches and channels that carried streams right to their fields, threading the landscape with veins of clear flow. Every ripple was deliberate. The excess was fed into mill races that turned water wheels, grinding grain or sawing timber, converting motion into muscle the way we use electricity today. Picture it: a single brook powering half a village, grain turning, hammers striking, saws singing. It was renewable energy centuries before the term existed. And what about fertilizer? They didn't have shiny bags of chemicals. What they had was patience and livestock. Manure, ash, and compost became their holy trinity. Each winter, peasants shoveled dung from their barns, mixed it with straw, soot, and kitchen scraps, and let it steam into dark, living soil. The smell wasn't pretty, but it was the scent of future bread. Wood ash added minerals. Rotting plants recycled every leftover nutrient. Nothing was wasted. When spring came, they spread that black gold over their strips, restoring what last year's crops had taken. These fields weren't private property in the way we think of land today. Farming was communal, a choreography of cooperation. Picture rows of peasants moving in unison, plowing, sowing, and harvesting side by side. The open field system meant everyone shared both risk and reward. A single plow team might work for 3 families in a day. Disputes over furrows were settled in laughter or, if needed, in ale. They knew that unity meant survival. One man's failed harvest was everyone's hunger. They even knew how to make plants play nice with one another. Companion planting wasn't theory, it was tradition. Beans curled up tall stalks of barley for support, while their roots fed nitrogen back to the soil. Cabbage grew beside onions to drive pests away. Herbs like sage, thyme, and dill lined garden edges, perfuming the air and confusing hungry insects. Nothing grew alone, because nothing survived alone. Their animals were part of the same grand design. Sheep grazed on stubble after harvest, trampling manure into the earth. Pigs rooted through fallow fields, clearing weeds. Chickens followed the plow, pecking grubs before they could hatch into next year's plague. Livestock weren't just food, they were moving tools, recycling nutrients, keeping balance. When you live that close to the land, you start to see patterns most of us miss. Medieval farmers read the sky like a calendar. They watched halos around the moon, listened to the pitch of the wind, tasted the air before rain. An old rhyme could tell you when to plant or when to hide from storms. They tracked the seasons with carved tally boards and lunar cycles instead of clocks. Those weather law sayings we laugh at today, many were data gathered by centuries of observation. When the swallow flies low, rain will follow. It wasn't superstition. It was meteorology in rhyme. Seed time was sacred. The best heads of wheat were tied with straw and saved, the way a family keeps heirlooms. Selection wasn't random, it was science guided by instinct. The fattest kernels, the hardiest stalks, the grain that bent but never broke in the windows became next year's future. Monasteries turned this practice into record keeping. Behind cloister walls, monks catalogued seed traits, tested soils, and traded specimens across regions. Their gardens were libraries, and every plant was a manuscript written in green. Even pests were handled with intelligence, not poison. Farmers encouraged birds, sparrows, swallows, even owls to patrol the fields, building small perches and nesting boxes to keep them nearby. They timed their sowing to dodge insect swarms, planted trap crops of mustard or clover to lure pests away from the grain, and welcomed ladybugs long before anyone knew what beneficial insects meant. When all else failed, they rotated fields again, starving out the problem instead of fighting it. It all worked because everything worked together. Soil fed plants. Plants fed animals. Animals fed soil. Water drove mills. The moon timed the planting. Birds guarded the harvest. It wasn't luck or magic, it was a living system, refined by 1,000 years of trial, error, and faith in the rhythm of the earth itself. Modern agriculture may use satellites and sensors, but the principles, they're the same ones peasants once followed barefoot, guided only by the sky, the seasons, and the whisper of growing things. And you can feel that rhythm most when the rotation turns over and the village shifts gears. You step onto the field at dawn, and the ground still remembers last year's grain, the straw ghosts under your boots, the stubble catching light like tiny spears. This year that strip carries legumes. You press seeds into the moisture line, knuckles deep, and the promise is immediate. Roots that fix what the grain took, flowers that draw bees, pods that rattle with protein when summer leans heavy. Across the path, the former legume strip now bears rye, that will shoulder the winter winds like a soldier. Farther out, the fallow waits wildflowers, volunteer clover, a green rest that hums with insects and quiets the soil's tired pulse. Nothing here is accidental. You can walk from need to answer in the space of a stride. By mid-morning, the heavy plow is breathing like a beast. Oxen lean into the yoke, hooves biting, tails flicking at flies, as the iron share bites and rolls the world inside out. The first furrow is always a gas bridge, wet earth opening with a dusky sweetness that makes every stomach in the team growl. You set your palm on the plow beam and feel the chatter through wood and bone. An old language of stones and roots tapping messages from below. A light plow would skate and sulk in this clay. The heavy one eats it, turns slick glue into tall ridges that catch sun and shed water. You watch the line straighten under your eye and realize this is geometry you can harvest. More depth, more air, more life in every inch. Water answers next. The ditches you cut last autumn are awake again. Arrows of mirrored sky guiding the melt toward thirsty beds. A mill race hurries beside the hedgerow, its edges feathered with reeds, then tightens into a chute that throws itself under the wheel. The paddles take the river's shoulder and turn it into workstones grinding. Belts thumping, a steady heartbeat you can set your day by. Spillways lift and drop with a lever, and the water lays a silver skin across the furrows, just long enough to sink. You count to 20 between gates, learning each field's thirst the way you learn a friend's temper. When a cloud bank shoulders the hill, you angled boards to hold the runoff in a catch pond. Tomorrow's certainty bottled from today's storm. All that motion would mean nothing without food for the soil. You open the compost heap and steam pours out like a kitchen in winter. Straw softened to silk, manure, gone chocolate. Cash sifted pale as dawn. Everything the farm couldn't eat turned into everything it craves. You thread it between rows where the earth still remembers last year's hunger. Ash brightens the mix with minerals pulled from fire. Crushed bone in the corner pile will take seasons to speak, but when it does, the grain will listen. The fork is heavy, and your shoulders ache, yet the work feels like paying a debt with interest. Even the smell, heavy and sweet, promises bread. No one does this alone. Along the boundary stones, voices braid together, jokes tossed like seed. Arguments that blow past and dissolve. Plans set while a child chases a hen with more hope than speed. The open field strips lie like ribbons, each family's plot braided into everyone else's. You help your neighbor turn his headland because he helped you wrestle the plow from that buried root yesterday. At the alehouse later, the tally runs longer than any one purse, because the currency is shared muscle and borrowed tools, and tomorrow's favor already half spent. The harvest will be the village's, and the hunger, if it comes, will be shared too. That knowledge sharpens your focus better than fear. Look closer between the main rows and the quiet tactics show themselves. Onions squat beside cabbage like stern scent. Dill leans over beans with loose laughter and a pocketful of pollinators. Barley offers its spine and beans climb, fixing invisible riches around their own feet. The garden's edge is crowded on purpose. Thyme whispering, sage muttering, marigolds lighting the border like small suns. Every scent is strategy, every shadow a shelter for a friend. You don't need a parchment of rules to know this. Your hands remember where the soil smiles back. When the grain is down to stubble, the flock comes in low and woolly, a tide of quiet mouths and clicking hooves. They mow and manure in the same motion, threading nutrients back where steel teeth cannot go. Pigs arrive with bright eyes and slit of snout, flipping clods, nosing after grubs, turning green threat into brown possibility. Chickens follow like gossip, scratching, pecking, breaking pest cycles one snap at a time. The pasture is not away from the farm, it walks across it, stitching animal to field, season to season, manure to bread. You learn to read weather the way you read faces. A ring round the moon, and you bank the thatch with stones. A swallow hunting low, and you pull in laundry and seed sacks. The western edge of the sky takes on that bruised velvet, and you can almost hear the rain's feet before it arrives. On warm nights, you set clay bowls in the garden to catch dew for seedlings that struggle with your clumsy watering. The year is a wheel you can feel beneath your soles. Candlemas thaw, Spring fling, St. John's blaze, Lammas loaves, Michaelmas geese, All Hallows breath turning white. Nothing on a clock can tell you more. Seeds are stories, and you become a careful editor. In the wheat, you mark the heads that carried themselves through last winds, tantrum stout spines. Even kernels, a color that looks like late afternoon. You bind those with straw and hang them where mice mind their manners. Peas from the earliest true pods, onions that kept sweet, cabbages that swelled tight as fists each chosen, each saved. When you visit the monastery, the garden hums with quiet industry. Labels carved in thin slips of wood, beds squared like pages, monks noting what thrived, what sulked, what ripened, when the south wall warmed and when the north wind sulked. You swap a handful of seed for a spoon of knowledge and walk home. Richer both ways, and still the world wants a tithe you can't afford, so you make allies. You'll lash small perches along the hedgerow so the owls have places to judge from. Mice hear the sentence in that silence. You bundle straw into a rough hoop and tie it in the barn gable to invite swallows. Their blue flicker is a promise your fields will be patrolled. You plant a strip of mustard along the boundary, a bright decoy to collect trouble, so your cabbages can nap undisturbed. When flea beetles sparkle where they shouldn't, you go early with a rope of rags and brush dew from leaves, nudging the pests into a jar that will meet the chickens later. You shift crops across the map like a general who knows the enemy bores isoliotes where beans were. Beans where barley bragged, fallow where roots needed rest. You don't fight so much as reframe the question. And often the pests have no answer. By midsummer, the rotation sings in harmony. The cereal strip throws long tassels that pour in the breeze like river hair. The legume strip hums with bees, their legs puffed with gold, sound stitched so tightly to light it feels like one thing. The fallow is not empty. It's a green room where the soil rehearses resilience. Clover, vetch, a little riot of flowers that feed whoever needs feeding. The heavy plow waits under the ash tree, iron edge oiled, wood rubbed with tallow. A sleeping dragon that will wake when the year turns. The mill keeps its decorous thunder, water whittling time to size. The heap behind the barn smokes gently on a cool morning. A kitchen for microbes that never closes. You look around and understand that none of this stands alone. The ditch's slope determines how much the wheel can speak, which dictates how fast the stones can chew, which decides whether the flour is warm when the dough needs it. The sheep's evening path redraws tomorrow's fertility. The moon's fatness sets the gardener's hands to seed or to patience. A rook's shadow falls across the beans, and for beetles think twice about their afternoon plans. It's a braid, this farm, human and animal, sky and clay, iron and breath-plated, so tight that any single strand by itself would snap. Together, it holds . And there's a quiet truth humming beneath the practical. This system teaches you how to pay attention to weather that whispers before it shouts, to plants that negotiate before they fight, to soil that forgives but does not forget. The three fields rotate, the plow carves, water turns, compost ripens, neighbors share, companions protect, animals integrate, seasons instruct, seeds remember, and the small hungry things in the hedges learn to fear your patience more than your fury. You don't conquer a landscape like this. You apprenticed yourself to it, and in the apprenticeship, survival becomes more than getting bit, becomes an art that feeds everyone at the table, even those not born yet by autumn's edge. The land feels like an orchestra finishing its refrain. The air has that crisp copper taste, and smoke from peat fires drifts low over the thatch. The grain stands high, nodding heavy heads toward the horizon, every stalk a thin line between hunger and plenty. You grip the sickle, its blade cold as a promise, and move through the field in measured rhythm. The cut grain leans into your arm like gratitude, sheaves stacking in neat soldiers across the slope. Children follow, binding bundles with straw twine, laughter breaking against the steady scrape of metal. Each stroke is muscle memory earned, precise. The kind of motion that connects you to every ancestor who ever fought winter with a harvest. When the wagons creak home, wheels groaning over ruts, you know what comes next. Threshing. The flail rises and falls in cadence, beating golden breath from husk to kernel. Dust and chaff swirl around you like a private weather system. Tiny suns catching light through the barn slats. It's brutal work, but when the final grains pour into waiting sacks, there's a reverent silence. Every handful feels warm, alive. The condensed heartbeat of the year. Outside, the oxen graze on the cut field, snorting clouds into the chill. Unaware they've become part of the grand rotation already. The straw will line their stalls. The manure will feed next season's soil, and the circle closes with no waste. As dusk settles, the water wheel still murmurs down by the mill a steady sermon about patience. The wheel creaks, splashes, spins, a rhythm as constant as prayer. Inside, the miller watches flour fall in a soft storm beneath the stone. His hands ghost over the sacks, testing fineness. And you see it. Generations have measured time not by clocks, but by the hum of labor done right. The river outside is black glass, catching fragments of torchlight. Above it, bats, zigzag-like ideas, half caught and half forgotten. There's peace in that pattern, the endless turn of work that keeps the world upright. Near the barns, steam curls from the compost heap. You turn it with a pitchfork, slow and deliberate. Inside, the warmth rises in a breath of rot and renewal straw. Peelings, manure, and ashes knitting together into dark promise. It smells alive, rich and faintly sweet. A blackbird flutters nearby, hopping closer, bold from habit. You smile. Even the smallest creatures have learned the rhythm of your days. The pile will feed the fields next spring. The fields will feed the animals. The animals, in turn, will feed the people. Everything feeding everything else. A living circle so old it no longer needs explanation. A few days later, the village gathers to mend fences before the first frost. Neighbors share hammers and gossip in equal measure. Children chase one another between posts. Someone's dog steals a crust of bread. There's a feeling of unspoken trust. No one can survive a season here alone. You trade help for help, labor for laughter. A widow receives her firewood. An old man repairs your cartwheel without being asked. Even disputes soften in the face of shared need. The open field system isn't just about land, it's about humanity braided into geography. You realize the harvest doesn't end in the granary. It ends in hands clasped over mugs of ale, in songs echoing across the lane long after dark. Out in the kitchen garden, the next experiment begins. You watch beans twist up stakes beside barley left to regrow short and wild. Peas curl along trellises of woven hazel. Beneath them, carrots push down, roots thick with the memory of manure and rain. Companion planting feels less like science and more like choreography. The dance of plants that know how to share space. Calendula petals flash gold between cabbage leaves, warding off insects with color and scent. It's a quiet miracle, watching living things cooperate better than most men. The garden hums under the noonday light. Bees moving slow, fat, unbothered. You wipe sweat from your brow and wonder how long it took humanity to forget that harmony can be deliberate. Later, you drive the sheep onto the stubble field. Their wool glows in the slanting sunlight, pale against the browns and rusts of spent crops. They graze, fertilize, and trample in the same graceful motion, hooves mixing residue and soil until the scent of earth turns rich again. Behind them, pigs root along the hedgerows, snorting softly as they unearth forgotten grain and pests alike. Chickens follow, pecking at stirred insects. The whole scene feels alive in layers, sound, movement, rhythm, each creature unconsciously doing its part. You marvel at how the system holds itself together. Nothing wasted. No hierarchy, only balance. Evening stretches, slow and amber. You glance skyward and find the moon sharpening against the fading blue. Weather reading is second nature now. A pale halo means rain. High swifts mean calm. The wind's voice tells you more than the Lord's messenger ever could. You taste the air, damp and metallic, and no frost will visit by dawn. The villagers have sayings for all of it. If the oak before the ash, and so on, but your bones carry a better almanac. The seasons have tutored you well. You keep your eye on the horizon, watching clouds pile like gray fleece, and mutter thanks to whatever old gods still listen from the tree line. Inside the byre, seeds wait in their cloth pouches, small treasures stitched from the year's best luck. Wheat heads from the straightest stalks, beans from the fullest pods, onions that refuse to rot. You turn them in your hand, feeling their weightless potential. Each is a story waiting for spring's punctuation mark. The monks in the nearby abbey will test their own collections, carefully labeled jars in neat rows, observations inked in steady Latin. When you visit, you trade a handful of barley for a pinch of strange herb they call sage. Their garden smells of damp stone, beeswax, and quiet ambition. Even in silence, the monks are writing the future of the soil, one careful experiment at a time. Back home, the barn eaves chatter with swallows, and you've learned to read their flight as a barometer to. When they skim low, the air thickens with rain. When they vanish altogether, snow can't be far. Beneath their nests, straw gleams with the faint glow of the oil lamp. You settle near the door and sharpen your blade slow, deliberate strokes. The rhythm is steady, satisfying, meditative. The sound echoes faintly against the timbers, mingling with the drip of water from the eaves. Beyond the doorway, the fields sleep under a skin of mist. You realize, quietly, that this world mud-breathed and calloused palms has built something close to perfection through necessity alone. The next morning, you rise before dawn. The frost has painted lace along the windows, and every breath feels visible. You step outside and see the first faint color of sunrise threading across the horizon, staining the world gold. The fields lie silent, but not empty. Beneath the crust of ice, roots wait, seeds wait. The soil, dark and dreaming, waits. You know the wheel will turn again soon. In that pause before the New Year's first furrow, you feel what the monks called grace and what the peasants called simple luck, that life, no matter how hard won, renews itself if you let it. By winter, the fields finally fall silent but not dead. Beneath the crust of frost, life hides in plans. The air smells faintly of smoke and iron. The sky hangs low, the color of pewter. The village exhales after months of work. What remains now is endurance. The long waiting season. Fires burn in every hearth. Soft orange light trembling against walls, blackened by decades of stories. Inside each cottage, you can hear the same slow rhythm, the scrape of spoons, the crackle of kindling, the sigh of wind pushing against shutters. This is the quiet test that separates the prepared from the desperate dot in the barns. Hams hang like bronze bells from rafters, their fat turned translucent by time and patience. Crops rest in sacks along the wall: grain, beans, onions, each labeled in chalk and pride. The animals shift in their stalls, breath steaming like incense. You toss them hay that smells faintly of summer, and for a moment, the world feels circular, complete. The oxen that broke the soil now feed on what the soil gave. Even the straw beneath their hooves will one day feed it back again. Nothing is wasted. Some nights, you walk to the smokehouse. Inside, the air is heavy, layered with years of effort, salt, fat, oak, and memory. You run your hand along the hooks, rough and sticky with resin. Each piece hanging there is more than food, it's a promise kept. When storms lash the valley and the river swells black and furious, you'll eat without fear because of the hours spent here. That's the strange comfort of this season. Security built from effort you no longer have the strength to repeat. At least not yet. The monks across the river keep their watch too. From the hill, you can see their abbey windows glowing like distant lanterns through the snow. Inside, they copy seed lists, repair leather bindings, and keep records of weather, yield, and soil behavior. They call it divine order. You call it common sense, dressed in Latin. Still, their precision saves lives. They've charted which fields drown first in flood, which herbs cure winter fevers, which moon best calls for sowing peas. Their world moves in prayer, yours in survival. Yet the rhythm matches perfectly. When the snow piles deep, work doesn't stop, it just shifts indoors. You patch harnesses, carve new handles for hose, twist rope from flax, and mend clothes by lamplight. The needle pulls through wool with a slow, deliberate sigh. Each stitch feels like a conversation with the past, a grandmother's lesson, a neighbor's joke, a moment that refuses to vanish. Outside, the wind howls down the chimney, a voice that knows your name. You pause, sip from a cup of ale brewed last harvest, and remind yourself that every storm eventually runs out of fury. The livestock breathe warmth into the cold. Sheep huddle, pigs snore. The horse stamps once and falls still again. You sit on a stool, watching your breath drift upward in ghostly ribbons. There's peace here, not in stillness, but in understanding what stillness means. The farm isn't asleep, it's thinking. The compost steams quietly behind the barn, heat rising from decay that smells almost sweet. Life and death negotiating again, unseen. On the rare clear nights, you step outside to read the stars. The constellations feel closer in winter, sharp and deliberate. The same patterns guided your grandfather home through fog, and his grandfather before him. You find the North Star and feel a tug of reassurance. It hasn't moved. It's the same light that led monks, sailors, and wanderers across centuries. In a world of uncertainty, that small consistency feels like faith made visible. When morning breaks, it does so softly. The light spreads blue first, then gold, spilling over the frozen ridges and touching every roof with warmth. You walk the field's edge, boots crunching frost, and kneel to test the soil. Hard, yes, but not lifeless. There's give beneath the surface, a quiet readiness. The stubble catches sunlight and throws it back, tiny mirrors glittering in rows. For the first time in weeks, you sense movement again, not seen, but felt, the land turning beneath the stillness, already preparing for the plow. By late winter, you're cutting willow switches to mend the fencing near the stream. The snow melts in patches, dark circles of mud appearing like ink stains across parchment. Birds return first in pairs, then in noisy flocks, their cries pulling sound back into the world. The thaw smells like wet wood, an iron rough, raw, alive. You drive the first stake, hear it bite the soil, and grin without meaning to. The rhythm is coming back. In the evenings, the village gathers at the alehouse. Firelight flickers over red cheeks and cracked hands. Someone brings a fiddle. Someone else tells a story so old no one remembers its start. Laughter shakes the rafters, and for a moment, hunger and hardship seem like rumors from another land. You raise your cup, the foam catching the firelight, and remember the year's first furrow, the oxen's strain, the wheel's steady hum. Everything you planted, grain, patience, faith has survived another winter. And when the thaw finally breaks for good, you stand at the edge of your field again. The snow retreats in silver ribbons, leaving behind earth dark as coffee and rich as promise. You lift a clod and crumble it between your fingers. It smells of everything you've done right and everything still to come. Overhead, geese cut across the sky, calling south to north, a sound so old it feels like language. You shoulder your plow, feel the leather creak, and whisper the only prayer you know. Let it begin again. Spring arrives not with a shout, but a soft exhale. The last frost melts off the thatch, sliding down into the gutters like memory releasing its hold. The soil, dark and breathing again, waits under a thin veil of mist. You walk the field's edge with your palm open, feeling the air tremble between cold and promise. Every step releases the faint scent of thaw-wet roots, ash, and something like iron. The oxen snort clouds into the dawn, stamping their hooves impatiently. They know before you do that, it's time. The first cut of the plow feels ceremonial. The blade bites deep, flipping the world over on itself. The scent that rises is the smell of rebirth, sharp and earthy enough to make your chest tighten. Behind you, gulls spiral and scream with joy, diving for the worms suddenly exposed to daylight. The furrows gleam, straight as thought, each one a wound and a vow. You steady your grip, the plow-wood smooth and warm now, guiding iron through clay like a writer through a sentence. The work is slow, but not weary. There's power in this rhythm, a conversation between muscle and land that needs no words. Soon, the whole village hums with renewal. In one yard, a woman mends baskets from last year's willow. In another, a boy drives geese away from the seed piles with a stick too large for his frame. The smith's hammer rings across the morning, the echo carrying over the fields like punctuation. By the river, monks stoop over their narrow gardens, adjusting the water channels that run like veins through the soil. A shared language pulses through it, all the sound of making, fixing, preparing. The year is new, but the work is ancient. You spread compost along the ridges, rich and warm from the long winter's decay. Steam curls up from it in thin white threads. It's the scent of patience made visible. Ashes from the hearth mix in, gray streaks against the dark soil. Bone dust, kitchen scraps, straw of it returns now as nourishment. You've learned to trust this alchemy, waste into life, death into sustenance. You turn it over with your fork, each lift heavy but satisfying. When the wind shifts, the smell of wet soil and manure carries across the valley, announcing spring more honestly than any church bell. In the evenings, when the work pauses, the village gathers near the watermill. The wheel creaks back to life, shedding its coat of moss, paddles flashing silver as they bite into the current. Children toss pebbles, laughing at the spray. The river runs full and fast now, swollen with milk. It hums beneath the miller's floorboards, patient and tireless. Inside, the grindstones begin their low thunder again, crushing grain to dust and dust to sustenance. It's music, deep, methodical, and ancient as the wheel itself. You rest your arms on the railing, listening, knowing this sound will carry you through every season, until you can no longer hold the plow. By late spring, color spills across the fields. Clover blooms red in the fallow plots, bees rolling drunkenly in their bounty. Pea vines twist up the trellis, their tendrils catching sunlight like gold thread. The barley heads are still soft and green, but already they whisper in the breeze. Along the borders, marigolds flash bright, guarding the cabbages from hungry intruders. You see balance in motion everywhere, plant against pest, shadow against heat, effort against rest. You don't call it science, but it is. You don't call it prayer, but it is that too. The animals return to their circuits. The sheep graze low, spreading their quiet wealth across the field in dark speckles of fertility. The pigs root and turn, unearthing stones the plow missed, preparing the ground without knowing. Chickens follow, clucking like gossips, scattering pests before they can think of mischief. Life overlaps and rewrites itself with every hour. The line between wild and domestic blurs. The world seems, for a moment, perfectly arranged. One afternoon, a storm rolls in from the west, bruised and heavy. You smell it before you see it, the metallic charge, the taste of ozone on your tongue. Clouds stack like fortress walls. The first drops hit the leaves with a sound like applause. Then the sky opens and everything becomes motion. You and the others dash to pull tools under shelter, laughing despite the cold. The rain pounds on the thatch. Thunder answers in long rolling sentences. When it finally passes, the air smells brand new. The world gleams. The soil drinks deep, satisfied. In the weeks that follow, you watch the rhythm return in full. Shoots rise, leaves broaden, fields hum. The plow sleeps under the tree again, its blades streaked with rust and light. The compost heap cools. The livestock stretch and graze, fattening on spring's generosity. The abbey bells carry faintly on the wind at dusk, calling monks to prayer just as swallows dart across the river in silver arcs. Everything, from bird to man to seed, moves in quiet agreement with everything else. And one night, sitting at the edge of your field, you finally understand the lesson this land has been teaching since the first furrow was cut. Survival was never the goal. Balance was. The turning of soil, the turning of water wheels, the turning of seasons, all of it a single, endless breath shared between human and earth. You look toward the horizon where the last light dies and think of every hand, every life, every cycle that brought you here. Tomorrow, the sun will rise, the plow will bite, and the song will begin again. But for now, you simply listen to the crickets tuning the night, to the faint creak of a windmill in the distance, to the heartbeat of a world still learning how to keep itself alive.